Over the years, Joe Rogan's podcast has featured some wild conspiracy theories, some of which seemed unbelievable. But instead of buying into them, he brought in experts, analyzed the facts, and debunked them. Here are some of the most famous conspiracy theories Joe Rogan proved wrong. Starting with Bigfoot. Bigfoot is the legendary ape-like creature that people claim roams the forest of North America. For years, believers have pointed to blurry photos, eyewitness accounts, and supposed footprints as proof. Joe Rogan used to be open to the idea of Bigfoot, even exploring on Joe Rogan Questions Everything. But after looking deeper, he realized there's zero solid evidence. No bodies, no bones, nothing.
Bob Hieronymus, who says he was Bigfoot, when you see him walk, he's this big old gangly cowboy looking dude. When you see him walk, he walks exactly like that Bigfoot thing.
You think it was him?
100%.
Huh.
Yeah. They even have a receipt from a fucking gorilla suit that they bought. Have you ever seen him walking side by side? Find a video of Bob Hieronymus walking side by side with the original Patterson footage. So they show the Bigfoot walking and then Bob walking, and you're like, oh. Like, I mean, because he looked like a Bigfoot. The guy was a fucking, there's dudes, big old cowboy looking dudes, big old fucking farm country strong dudes.
Yeah.
They look like apish. They're just big old fuckers.
The Patterson-Gimlin film is one of the most famous pieces of evidence for Bigfoot. Filmed in 1967 by Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin in Bluff Creek, California. The grainy footage shows a large, hairy figure walking through the woods. This clip became the foundation of Bigfoot lore, convincing many that the creature was real.
And this guy was one of those guys. And you see him walking, and he walks right, they superimpose it. They put side by side, rather. And when they do it, you go, oh yeah, definitely.
What a disappointment.
Do you want to believe that it's real?
No, I don't want to believe.
Did you ever believe it was real?
When I was 8, yeah.
And when you're 9, you're like, get the fuck out of here. Yeah, but my God, there's people to this day, those hardcore Bigfoot people are cult members. They really are. They decide to shut off a part of their brain that critically looks at information.
Aren't there any eyewitnesses who strike you as credible? I was talking to Les Stroud about this. Do you know Les? I was talking to Les once about this, I think.
Yeah, Les, he's a very credible guy in terms of like survival tactics. He knows a lot about that. But he didn't see one with his own eyes. He heard something. And he heard noises that sounded chimpanzee-like. Bears make those noises all the time. I've seen bears make those. I've watched bears make those noises. They make them particularly when they're fighting with each other. They sound very much like gorillas. They do that all the time. So if you were alone in the woods and you heard that and you heard smashing and thumping around, you're like, oh my God, there's a gorilla out there. Oh my God, there's some kind of a primate out there. There have been people that have spotted things that are very eerily similar to what you would think is a large bipedal ape. The problem is, a lot of these places are heavily wooded and populated by bears. And bears walk on 2 legs all the time. So there's Bob, and there's the Bigfoot, right? I mean, case closed, right?
I never saw that.
I mean, look at that dude. Look, isn't he like what I said? Big old country dude?
Yeah.
I mean, we see that guy walking, and you imagine him with a fucking gorilla suit on. I mean, it doesn't even look good.
But over the years, people started poking holes in it. Skeptics pointed out how the Bigfoot in the film moves like a man in a suit. Even worse, a man named Bob Hieronymus came forward, claiming he was the one in the costume. Several costume designers also noted that the suit looked just like the Hollywood gorilla costumes from the time. Joe Rogan didn't buy into the hype either. After looking into it, he called the film out as a fake, pointing out how nobody ever found any real evidence to back it up.
I don't know what that is. Yeah. But I definitely know that the guy, that there's a whole paper trail of buying a gorilla. Is that what he's saying? That's the suit?
I honestly don't know. I've never seen this video. I was trying to find the side by side. I was having a hard time finding it, and this is the one I picked. And
okay, so he's saying that that's what he wore. But that thing does look like it. If you go back to that video, that photo of where he's holding up that suit, that looks pretty fucking similar, man. Pretty fucking similar. And all you'd have to do is put that thing on and walk through the woods. And it's just too convenient. All of it's too convenient. That the fact that the guy went looking for it and found it and filmed it, and the whole thing's corny. It's corny.
Data matters.
Data does matter, and there's no real data in terms of genetics. There's been a lot of like goofy talk that they found like some kind of human DNA in samples of hair. The problem with that is all that DNA's been contaminated. I actually talked to an actual biologist about this, and we did an episode of Joe Rogan Questions Everything for the Sci-Fi Channel on Bigfoot. We hung around with Bigfoot hunters. Duncan and I went out with them and looking for Bigfoot and camping with them and everything. And it's people that are just looking for something, and some of them have had experiences. Some of them have said they've seen things, but it's just, all of it just reeks of horseshit. And it's unfortunate because I think at one point in time it was real. I think most certainly at one point in time human beings did interact with Gigantopithecus. It was a real animal. You know about that?
Mm-hmm.
And Gigantopithecus matches exactly like what people talk about when they talk about Sasquatch. It looks exactly like that. An enormous bipedal hominid that was, maybe more than 8 feet tall. And they found out about this thing by accident when a guy was looking in an apothecary shop in China, and he found gigantic teeth that were clearly primate teeth. He's like, where'd you find these? And they go there and they go to the site, and they dig out jaw bones that indicate it was bipedal. And so now they know it's a real thing that existed. And I think they date that to, when do they date? I think they date that to 100,000 years ago. When did they date Gigantopithecus to?
Wikipedia says roughly 2 million to 350,000 years.
350,000. I thought it was closer. I thought it was closer to us.
That's just what Wikipedia says. I have to see if there's other disputes or something.
Yeah, see, because I'd read that the carbon date that they did on these teeth, I think they said that was somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 and something thousand years ago. So that would put it, with semi-modern looking human beings.
Mm-hmm.
So the question
Very
is,
modern.
right? And then the question is like, how long did it survive? Like, just because you find something, say if you find one that's 200,000 years old, doesn't mean it didn't exist 100,000 years ago or even 50,000 years ago. Like, when was the last one? When did they die off? And when did humans encounter them? And if you look at their range, like if they found them in Asia, and then you look at the Bering landmass, and you look at where does it drop off? Well, it drops off in the Pacific Northwest. Like, that's like literally like goes down Alaska, makes its way down the coast. A dense forest, which is where a thing like that. So proteins extracted from a roughly 1.9 million year old tooth of the aptly named Gigantopithecus is a close relative to modern orangutans. So protein comparisons amongst living fossil apes suggest that Gigantopithecus and orangutan forerunners diverged from a common ancestor between 10 and 12 million years ago.
Jeez.
But when did it die off?
It's the same thing. It says they hadn't found anything
300,000
from the late Pleistocene era. They only have this from the early part of it.
Okay, so it said the fossils date from around 2 million to almost 300,000 years ago. The sizes of individual teeth and jaws indicate that it weighed between 200 and 300 kilograms. That's a big fucker. Interesting. So that was Bigfoot. So if humans did make it to the point where we had language and the ability to communicate ideas, they probably would communicate about all these creatures that they encountered, and that would be one of them.
Yeah.
But the actual like Patterson footage Bigfoot, that's horseshit.
There's no solid DNA evidence. Supposed Bigfoot hair samples have all been contaminated, making them useless for real analysis.
You said it's. I remember you one time going, "There's nothing out there." Yeah, didn't you say that about
Hunters
Bigfoot?
don't see it. That's why I don't believe in it.
Some hunters do.
No, not many.
People that see it are usually loggers, hunters, natives, people that are out in the woods.
There's another problem. Another problem is dusk. You see things at dusk or at dawn. It's very confusing.
Mm-hmm.
Bears walk on 2 legs all the time. I have personally watched bears walk on 2 legs, and if I didn't know any better, and if it was a dark environment, like it was dusk, you barely can see, I would think it's Bigfoot.
Right.
Yeah. But I do think Bigfoot existed.
Yeah.
There's some insane number of Native American words for Bigfoot.
Oh, yeah.
Sasquatch is just one of them. There's a bunch of them. There's a bunch of Native American words for this one animal that's fake, but all the other words they have are for real animals. They don't have a bunch of dragons. They don't have like mythical creatures in Native American mythology, but they do have this one giant man thing that definitely existed.
At some point.
At 100%, Gigantopithecus was a real animal. It was 8 to 10 feet tall, bipedal hominid.
Yep.
It was a huge gorilla-looking primate that died off somewhere around 100,000 years ago, but they don't know really for sure.
100,000?
Yeah, but they don't know for sure. The thing about it is, it's like, if you only find fossils from 100,000 years ago, you could assume that that this animal at least lived then. But you don't know when it went extinct.
Right.
You might find some new fossil like 10 years from now. They might find some new site. And wait a minute, these are 20,000 years old, or these are 30,000 years old, or these are 50,000 years old. But either way, anatomically identical human beings have been around for 500,000 plus years, maybe even more. So, or similar human beings. So then we definitely interacted with them.
Yeah.
Or they were around when we were around.
I think they're still around. I think there's hundreds, maybe thousands of them. That's what I believe. I think they're in caves or something. Or maybe it's...
You know what the problem with that is?
What?
They're too big. The amount of food that they would need to eat,
Yeah.
you'd have to be grazing all day long. See, if you're Bigfoot,
Posted in the Journal of Zoology this month.
if it's there, could it be a bear?
They're saying it's black bear, American black bear.
Yeah, American black bear that stands up.
But even
Yeah,
little
that's what I'm
kids
saying.
Yeah.
would know the difference between a monkey and a bear.
No. First of all, let me tell you something. If you're in the woods and you're in a heightened state because you're looking around, you don't know what's out there, it's all thick woods, it's weird. Woods are weird.
Yeah.
And you see something, you could trick your brain. I saw a squirrel, and for like 2 or 3 seconds, I thought it was a wolf.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
was
That's
like,
real.
wolf?
That's real
It's like-
between here.
I'm seeing something moving in between thick trees, and I see gray fur. I'm like, oh my God, is that a wolf?
Yeah.
Because there's wolves out there.
Right.
I'm in Canada. I'm like, oh no, it's a fucking squirrel. What the fuck is wrong with me? What the fuck is wrong with me?
Shoot it.
Yeah. It's like people see what they want to see.
Yeah.
And the problem is you get something into someone's head, a mythological thing, whether it's a UFO or whether it's Bigfoot. I think the world is way more slippery than we like to think. And I think there's states of consciousness that people can achieve during high anxiety levels, definitely during the use of psychedelic drugs.
Yes.
Sometimes during weird states in their life, like near-death experiences, loss of a loved one, extreme emotion,
Yeah.
a lot going on, a lot of anxiety and fear, like you would have if you're in the woods.
Sure.
And then you
You're on edge.
see a light across the sky. And it might have been just a meteorite.
Right.
But you're in the wrong headspace to
Yeah.
see that meteorite. And you just freak.
Yeah.
And maybe for a brief moment, you can see something that's been there all along.
Gigantopithecus, a massive ape, existed hundreds of thousands of years ago, may have crossed paths with early humans. That could explain the origins of Bigfoot stories, but the modern legend has no real proof. The Patterson footage doesn't hold up.
You know, Les Stroud.
Yeah.
He did that show about
Survivor Man Bigfoot, yeah.
but it just went away.
Bro, that show, I love Les Stroud. I love him. I love Survivor Man, but that show was so fucking dumb.
Yeah.
He had a guy on the show that is known in the Bigfoot world as being full of shit,
Yeah.
which is bad. Like, if the Bigfoot world's pretty open-minded. I mean, this is one of the things that I wanted to bring up about that 411 The Hunted thing. There's audio recording that was supposedly taken from the 1970s from Northern California. I want to say Sonoma? I don't remember where it was. It was somewhere in Northern California, but they call them the samurai sounds. The samurai, and it's the weirdest shit ever, man. It's like these guys had this spot that they would go into the mountains, and they would hunt every year. And they built this structure out there, and then they brought recording equipment, and they claimed to have recorded sounds of these animals, these Bigfoot, and that these Bigfoot were around them all the time while they were up there. Now, what's crazy about it is the sounds are so weird. It sounds like someone pretending to be Japanese that doesn't actually speak Japanese. Yeah. Have you ever heard it? No. We'll play it for you. It's because it's the weirdest shit. It sounds so strange and so fake, but like they have these quote unquote experts that say the human voice is not capable of making sounds remotely similar to this. The range is, which doesn't make any sense if you know who Michael Winslow is. Yeah. Right?
Yeah, I know.
That guy that guy went on.
He does a woman peeing when she goes to the bathroom.
He does everything.
Yeah, he does everything.
He did Led Zeppelin. He played Whole Lotta Love with his mouth. Yeah. And it sounds incredible. But this samurai sound, like there's these loud whoops, and these guys are like in the foreground, like the guys who are recording, they're trying to communicate with these things. They sound so calm. I mean, if there really was giant fucking 8-foot apes out there wandering around like, 200-300 yards away from you, screaming and whooping and talking, would you really, and you're in the woods, would you really be so calm? Wouldn't you be freaking the fuck out?
Oh, yeah.
These guys, do you have it?
Yeah, I'm trying to make sure I find the right thing because I'm stumbling across some traps.
Oh.
Like people are fucking around the internet.
I wish I could remember the gentleman's name.
Well, I think I have it, is all I'm saying. So, Ronald J. Moorhead and Alan Berry, maybe? Is that right?
Yes, Ron Moorhead. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's it. The Sierra Mountains. That's what it is. All right. And so, it's the weirdest shit ever. Just listen to this. You're going to...
I read what it could be, but we'll listen first.
Oh, it could be bullshit.
Yeah,
That's what it could be.
That sounds like all aboard.
Listen to the guy. This is, hold on, stop. This is a terrible version of it. Wow. There's a better version of it where you can hear the guys really clearly. The people talking. I don't know why that's so scratchy. But they're like, they're over by the lake. Like they're talking like that. And they hear this very strange sound.
And they're being calm about it.
Yeah. And these, supposed vocal experts are analyzing it. The human body is incapable of making such sounds.
And just like Bigfoot, there's the moon landing theory. The moon landing hoax is one of the most famous conspiracy theories ever. It claims that the Apollo 11 mission in 1969 was faked and filmed on a Hollywood-style set instead of actually landing on the moon. People who believe this point to things like the American flag appearing to wave despite no atmosphere, the lack of stars in the photos, and the odd lighting and shadows in NASA's footage. They argue that the U.S. faked the landing to win the space race against the Soviet Union.
Oh, this is the one. He hops by, and as he hops by, the breeze makes the flag blow.
Because he's in an air environment. He's not on the moon.
Right. That is a weird one. Do it again. Look at this. As he hops by, he doesn't touch the flag.
Now, can I do devil's advocate? What do you call it? Steel what?
Steel man.
Okay, the reason why it's doing that, and really on the moon, is because there's micrometeorites hitting him, and they're bouncing off of him and hitting the flag.
What?
Is that a pretty good one?
Is that real?
No,
I thought they were trying that one.
I was trying to come up with an excuse as to why the moon landings are real. Do you like that one?
That is a good one. Micrometeorites will mess you up.
Well, actually, Von Braun, we found publications of his. Mind you, my film cost $1 million. It was financed by a board member of an aerospace company who builds rockets for NASA, who knows it's fake, who gave me $1 million to produce these films as his patriotic duty to expose it. We found documentation from Von Braun that says every 24 hours on the moon, there's a 50% chance of a catastrophic, deadly error because of decompression from a micrometeorite. So they were there 3 days. They were 150% chance they would have been killed from a micrometeorite. Grain of sand traveling through space at 25,000 miles an hour. And he said you would have to immediately go into a cave once you landed. They never did that. He also said in writing, in order to go to the moon in one rocket, he says that cannot happen. You need 3 rockets, each being 10 times the tonnage of the Queen Mary, or some 800,000 tons each, in order to go to the moon. And the Saturn V was 2,500 tons, not 800,000 tons. We have that in writing.
That was from his book, right? And what year was that?
I think that came out in 1959, and then he recanted on his math shortly thereafter by 30,000%. And now Elon Musk wants to, quote, return to the moon. And he says to return to the moon, we need to make 9 fuel trips first to ferry the fuel necessary to be able to go to the moon from there. That's exactly what Von Braun said in one of my clips at Sabrel.com. You have to make multiple fuel trips to go to the moon first to a space station, and then from there you can go. Elon Musk said the same thing. But how did they do it with a rocket that contained 1/30,000th% of the amount of fuel Von Braun said it would take?
One of my favorite films is the film of the lunar module leaving the moon. When it leaves, when the camera pans, and let's show it. Let's show what year was that? Which
I think that was one of the last missions. And I think you're talking about where the camera perfectly tilts up with the little model going up.
Yes.
And, of course, with the delay, how could you synchronize that? Of course, you couldn't.
Well, you could, because it's 4 seconds, right? Just like it's radio waves.
Well, but it'd probably be more than that going through all the analog equipment.
Right, but you could time it. You could have a 5-second delay. So this is it. So this is launching off the, watch this.
And it's perfectly tilting up with it in real time.
It's just
with the remote control from NASA with the radio delay that I suspect would be more like 12 seconds.
But also,
because today, if you say to someone in Atlanta talking to someone in Iraq, hey, how's it going? 1, 2, 3. Hey, I'm doing fine.
What if they just
That's
put a timer on it?
That's just on
you can put
halfway
a
around the
timer on it.
world.
You can put the panning is interesting, but you could put a timer on it. The thing looking so goofy is so crazy. Like that thing is supposed to get off 1/6 Earth gravity and fly like that. How? What's it doing? It looks so fucking fake. It looks like it's being pulled by strings. Look, it might be real. I'm certainly not an astronaut. I don't know what I'm talking about. But if you had a guess, if you showed this to me and said, "Hey, do you think this is real or fake?" and you didn't give me any context, I'd be like, "What is this? A cheap science fiction movie? What is this?" And then here it goes. Like, that's leaving a planet? How's it leaving? Is that some new space technology? Where's the fire coming out of the bottom of it? How's it doing that? I mean, it just looks fake. It might be real. It might be one of those things that is real but looks fake.
All right, see, so then
Right?
this is where it gets weird, because it doesn't say the timer. It said somebody in Houston had to anticipate the timing, ignition, liftoff, which I guess he could have guessed it was going to be in 5 seconds and just lifted the remote control up.
Could he have guessed?
I have no idea what he was using. I have to look that up.
I guess you could guess if you say, I'm going to launch
Also, if they timed
in
it.
5,
Yeah.
and so then you count 10. Because he's going to, you got like a 5-second delay. And so when he gets to, like, if he counts down from 10, if he gets to 5, you hit it.
Well, there's a 3-second delay today, halfway around the world with modern equipment, talking from like Atlanta to Iraq.
Right.
3-second delay.
He also could have fucked it up.
Only
We've never
halfway
seen
around
it.
the world with modern equipment.
He
So
has to
going-
say it.
so
So the guy on the
going-
moon has to say, I'm launching
It
now,
could-
and he has to wait 5 seconds.
It would be at least a 12-second delay, I think, and possibly more than that. The delay itself of the radio, light waves there and back, plus all that analog equipment.
But it is not
slowing it down.
impossible to do a 12-second delay. It's only 12 seconds. If you had a stopwatch and you counted it and you had a far enough vision where you could see the base of the lunar module, you could see it detach, and then you kind of got it as long as you got enough of a field of view in the footage. But boy, it looks fake. It also looks fake in the way it's moving up. Watch it again, Jamie. because it's moving up like it's being pulled by strings.
Well, it looks fake because it is fake.
But most things that look fake are fake. Not all of them, but the vast majority of things that look fake are fake. Now,
Bart Sibrel is a filmmaker and one of the most well-known moon landing deniers, famous for confronting astronauts and claiming NASA faked the Apollo missions. On Joe Rogan's podcast, he laid out his key arguments: the flag waving in a vacuum, the lack of a blast crater under the lunar module, and the dangers of radiation in deep space. He also pointed to Wernher von Braun's earlier writings, which suggested space travel beyond Earth's atmosphere would be nearly impossible due to micrometeoroids. Rogan, while skeptical, challenged Sibrel's claims, questioning how thousands of people could keep such a massive secret. The conversation was a clash between conspiracy theory and mainstream science, with neither side backing down.
watch how this pulls up. Here it goes. It detaches. It's like... What is that? Now, here's the question. Did they practice this at all on Earth? Did they practice taking off on one of those things, or could they?
I don't think they
because
did. They
couldn't.
practiced landing.
But here's the question. They
yeah.
couldn't, right? Because it wouldn't have the same amount of thrust on Earth because the gravity is so much stronger. So that thing wouldn't have been operational on Earth, right?
Well, they had a lunar lander simulator that Neil Armstrong almost got killed in 6 weeks beforehand. He couldn't fly it on Earth in the safety of a tried and true environment. And that was 6 weeks.
Right, but also,
beforehand.
again, the gravity of Earth is much greater than the gravity of the moon.
Well, they took that into account. It was supposed to be a simulation of it. But
So
the
it was more
simulation-
powerful to overcome Earth's gravity in
Right.
comparison.
Right.
Yeah. But so then you're dealing with a totally different machine, and you're dealing with totally different factors. Maybe it would be easy with 1/6 Earth's gravity. Maybe easy, like wee, boom, it lands, and wee, it takes off.
Apparently it was.
But 1/6, I would like to know, like, how much thrust do you need to get off of the gravity of the moon if it's 1/6 Earth's gravity versus what it takes to get off of Earth? Like, what are those calculations, and how is that amount of force being generated by that thing? And is it? Because that would be a really good question. Because if you can't prove that you could do that, like, how do you do that?
Well, this is one reason why NASA destroyed all the schematics, all the electronics, all the diagrams of the equipment, because you could later prove that the lunar module, see, they claimed that the lunar module was powering air conditioning on a bank of car batteries and competed against 250 degrees outside and got it down to a comfortable 72 for 3 or 4 days. I mean, you try that at home, with your car batteries.
Also,
and-
batteries of today. Like, my
That's right.
Tesla only goes 350 miles
That's
if I
right.
drive real slow.
And so they're saying they powered air conditioning off much more primitive batteries, 24 hours, 3 or 4 days in a row, against 250 degree outside. So this is an indirect proof. If you really went to the moon and spent $200 billion, you would never destroy the technology. But one of the clips we have is them saying that they intentionally destroyed all of the equipment to go to the moon. All the diagrams, all the hardware, all the schematics, all the original telemetry of where the rocket was at the time, and all the original videotapes. Ron Howard's grandfather warned him the moon landings were fake. He didn't listen. He wanted to make an IMAX movie. He went to NASA, said, give me all the originals so I can transfer it to HD, and project it at 120 feet wide. They said, give us a couple of days. And in those days, they lost every single original videotape from every single Apollo mission.
NASA couldn't fully test taking off from the moon on Earth because of gravity differences. They used a lunar lander simulator, but it wasn't the same as launching in low gravity. Neil Armstrong almost died using this simulator just weeks before Apollo 11, showing how risky it was.
Now, if you really went to the moon and spent $200 billion, the last thing you would do is destroy that technology. But if you perpetrated a fraud, that's exactly what you would do.
So what is this, Jamie?
I think video of them practicing.
So is this
landing? But not
landing?
taking
Is
off.
that, there's Neil Armstrong?
It's the same machine. I believe.
So this is the one that he was practicing on that he almost died in? Look at that thing. Wow, that's crazy.
There's also an article I found about how they filmed it. They tried on Apollo 15 and 16 and failed for different reasons, and then they finally got it right on 17.
So it was a timing thing. So several second delay. Here it goes. The cameras were very successful capturing the images of numerous EVAs, but while they could be controlled from Houston, it was felt that several second delay between Earth and the Moon would make capturing the module's ascent impossible. So the plan was to pre-program the camera and hope that NASA camera operator in Houston, Ed Fendel, got his timing just right. On Apollo 15, the tilt mechanism malfunctioned, meaning the camera was never panned upwards, and thus the lunar module rapidly accelerated upwards and out of the picture. On Apollo 16 mission, the astronauts actually parked the rover in the wrong place, so while the cameras worked perfectly, it was too close to the module, and again, once it lit up the engines, it accelerated swiftly out of picture. Happily, Apollo 17 got everything right, but what is perhaps most remarkable about looking back on it was that no one realized the significance of the liftoff at the time. Persistent rumors suggest that NASA had to pay the networks to cover Apollo 17 mission at all, and when final liftoff of humanity from the moon took place, it barely raised a mention on that evening's news reports. That's a really important point, too, because people were really tired of it. Like, they were mad that it was interrupting I Dream of Jeannie.
I Love Lucy.
Oh, that's what it was. I Love Lucy. Yeah.
Well, that's from Wikipedia that continually defends the fake moon landings. In fact, if you type in moon landing fraud, you don't get anything about the fraud. You get 1,000 videos defending the supposed moon missions. Now, if the moon missions are real, then anyone who says otherwise is an idiot.
Okay, so how did they defend?
If I were going around saying George Washington was not the first president, it was really Mickey Mouse, do you think there'd be 1,000 videos to reassure people that George Washington was the first president and not Mickey Mouse? But there's 1,000 videos out there that took tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of hours to produce to defend the moon landings. If it's so obvious, they should speak for themselves. It has to be continually supported because it's made out of straw. That's why.
So the lunar module leaving the surface of the moon, how did they practice that? If it was the first time they ever pulled that off, the first time they ever tried it?
I think they used a simulation. But
did they do that on the moon?
Well, they couldn't practice. They
Right,
had to
so-
do
but
it for the first time. They did it
they have the
flawlessly every
ability?
single time.
Did they have the ability to land something on the moon and have it take off remotely? Did they have that kind of control back then?
No, I don't think so.
Probably not, right? So if Apollo 11 did happen and they did take off, and that time they did it was the first time anybody had ever tried to use one of those things to get off the surface of the moon.
Worked every time flawlessly.
Person in it.
With a person in it, with two people in it. Three.
They landed
Two people in it, one person in the lunar orbiter.
10 were launched into space. Of those, 6 landed by humans onto the moon. First 2 were flown tests in low Earth orbit without a crew at Apollo, though.
Let's talk about the AI discovery.
Yeah.
You know about that, right?
But hold on, before we get going. So the first 2 were in America?
Dress rehearsal for the landing was Apollo 10 and then conducted on Apollo 11.
And so is there footage of them trying that thing?
Apollo 10?
No, just having it launch on Earth. I'd be fascinated to see what it looks like. How that thing gets into the air. Because if they were able to make a lunar lander that Neil Armstrong got in, that thing that looked very different than the ones that were on the moon. But that thing, if he's doing that to try to overcome the 6 times gravity that Earth has over the moon, what does that look like when they're testing that thing? Like, how much thrust does it have? And where is the engine? Where is the rockets that propel that thing into space? Like, where do you fit those? This is my question. And so how did they explain that away? Like, what is the conventional explanation as to how that thing had the amount of power that was required to get off of the moon's gravity, get away from the moon, and fly to Earth?
Well, how did they do it with 1/30,000% of the fuel that von Braun said they had to? Why is it today, to quote, return to the moon, you have to make 9 fuel trips to be able to go to the moon and return, but somehow they did it in 1 trip?
NASA claims they did all the calculations and the takeoff worked perfectly every time. However, key documents, schematics, and even original footage were later destroyed. Some earlier missions also had issues filming the takeoff, which raises questions. If the moon landing was obvious, why are there thousands of videos defending it? Real events don't usually need that much explanation. Next, we have none other than the Flat Earth Theory.
I listened to Radiolab on the way over here. And they have a new episode out about the asteroid impact that killed the dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Holy shit, man.
Right. Apparently, they tell me if I'm right about this before you tell me more, because I want to see if I have a little knowledge.
Go ahead.
There is there's a very hard layer of rock that covers a large part of the Earth.
Right.
And that is proof that somehow there was an asteroid that hit and it got really, really hot and the rock got...
That is a moron's version of the science that they clearly lay out.
And by the way, it's the worst thing. I'm also like, there's rock that got melted, that it was under the ground.
Undeniable evidence of a rock from the space area.
There's a layer of the Earth. The crust of the Earth is super hard because it got really hot after an asteroid hit and everybody died. They found dinosaur bones in it.
Yeah, bro. They can
I don't believe in dinosaurs because I have something called the Bible at home. But
some people don't believe in dinosaurs. Do you know that, right?
Yeah.
This flat Earth folks, they believe dinosaurs are fake.
Why is it that most flat earthers, from my experience, are generally super good at a discipline that has nothing to do with astrophysics, like jiu-jitsu? Like they spend a lot of time on a mat, but then they have really strong political opinions about the central banks.
I think it's just a lack of real education, and then you get caught up in these YouTube things that show you a secret, and it's very attractive. It's very attractive to find out about some hidden stuff.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, I can't believe they did this. They hid from us the fact that the Earth is flat. Jesus Christ, space is fake? Bro, space is fake. Satellites aren't real. They're low-flying planes. They're planes. They're constantly beaming down these information from the sky. Satellites are not real.
Yeah.
Nuclear bombs. They're not real.
Yeah.
They're not real. They're just big bombs.
But then the problem is when you break your leg and you have to set your bone, or you get staph and you have to trust Big Pharma to cure it, or you use your iPhone and it works and you're talking to somebody in
That's
Japan.
the big one.
You know what I'm saying?
iPhone's the big one.
So, but why is that technology something you trust and the other stuff is not?
Your fucking iPhone has a global positioning satellite chip in it.
Stop it.
Chorus, it links up with the fucking one that's in the sky, and it tells you where you are on the map. That's why your Google Maps works. Jesus fucking Christ.
I think there are probably only 5 or 6 flat earthers.
No, there's a lot.
Yeah.
There's thousands of them.
Well, okay, thousands.
Trust me.
But that really means only 5 or 6 in the grand scheme of
I
things.
think the problem with all of them is that they just got married to the idea and then they're fighting it. And if you fight it with someone who doesn't know what they're talking about, not that I do know what I'm talking about, but if you fight it with like a Sean Carroll or like a real astrophysicist, a real scientist,
somebody studied, yeah.
There's so much evidence that the Earth is round and no evidence that the Earth is flat.
Flat Earth Theory says the Earth is flat, not round. People who believe this think the government is hiding the truth and that space photos are fake. They argue that things like gravity and the horizon don't prove Earth is round. Most scientists say the Earth is round, backed by photos, gravity, and how things disappear over the horizon. But Flat Earth believers still push the idea online.
Which is what, and Mary goes to the manger. The animals are not in the manger, not at the. So there's secondary evidence for that's probably happened in the spring. That's
now,
right.
with the advent of commercial space travel, which seems inevitable. Seems inevitable, right?
Love your segues. Yes, okay.
Do you think that it's possible that maybe you could even offer up a flat Earth believer tour, where you take them, like at the very least, take them up to Alaska where it's light for 23 hours
flat
a day?
Earthers calling into you? Is this
tweeting me constantly? Yeah, call me a sellout. I'm a sellout. I'm a round Earth sellout. Like as if there's some round Earth money.
Wow.
Yeah,
you're on the payroll.
I'm getting some checks. I'm getting some round Earth checks
you're
to
getting
keep
some
the
payola,
nonsense going.
some round Earth payola for your show.
I'm sure you've seen the basketball player who graduated from Duke.
That was hitting the news the last couple of days.
And
I saw
he believes that dinosaurs are fake and that the world is flat.
Okay, so here's the thing, Joe. Okay, here, I've thought about this.
I bet you have.
As an educator, I've thought about this. Okay. So here's what matters. We live in a free country. People should be able to think whatever they want, whenever they want, provided it doesn't subtract away from someone else's rights. Okay. So thinking the earth is flat doesn't harm anyone unless you want to run for office or you want some position of power over other people. That's when it's dangerous. I'm thinking of elevator banks where they have numbers. You know, I have a photo essay of what elevators look like inside. I know it's just...
You mean the gears? And
No, not even that geeky. Just what are the numbers on the panel?
Oh, without the 13, you mean?
Yeah, exactly. So about 80% of buildings taller than 12 stories don't have a 13th floor. Okay? And so this trixidecaphobia is, again, in a free country, if you want to be afraid of the number 13, go right ahead. It just seems to me you should not be tasked with designing elevators if that's your fear. Find something else to do. Holding aside the fact that I'm a little scared that in this 21st century United States of America, we have people walking among us afraid of the number 13. What does that mean? I don't know in the long run. But if you keep to yourself, don't harm others, think whatever you want.
Neil deGrasse Tyson isn't just any scientist. He's the guy who makes the universe fun to talk about. Whether he's breaking down black holes or shutting down conspiracy theories, he's always got a way of making science entertaining. But when he sat down with Joe Rogan, the conversation took a turn into something a little more ridiculous: flat earth theories, people afraid of the number 13, and a basketball player who thinks dinosaurs never existed. And as always, Neil had a lot to say.
So the rubber hits the road is you now have power over others. And that's where the failure of the educational system actually manifests.
Now, when you get in a debate with a guy like that,
I don't debate
B.O.B.
people.
guy...
I don't debate people.
Okay, well, when you discuss,
because as the saying
educate...
goes, when an argument lasts more than 5 minutes, both sides are wrong.
Well, that's a terrible saying. It's
Yeah,
definitely
it's mostly
someone
right.
wrong and the other person's stubborn. You know, it could definitely last for hours.
Yeah.
That's not true at all.
It's not. It's true 80% of the time. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But you got into it with that rapper that thinks that the...
I'll tell you why, B.O.B. Because in his Twitter stream, he was saying he was invoking physics. And so I gotta deal with this.
Right. Yeah.
And so he showed a picture from Bear Mountain, which is a mountain in slightly upstate New York, where Manhattan is in the sight line of the summit of this mountain. And he says, given the curvature of the Earth and this formula, you should not be able to see Manhattan at all. Okay.
It depends on the height that you're viewing.
Well,
it from.
thank you. Well, so you do the math, and it turns out Manhattan, the island, would not be visible at all. That's true. But any building taller than 15 stories would rise up above the curvature of the Earth, and you will see it. And if you look at the photo, you see the tall buildings rising above 15 stories. It's exactly what the correct formula shows, and not his formula, which was wrong and misinterpreted, claims to show.
Well, it's just bizarre because snipers have been using the literal curve of the Earth to plan where bullets go. That's how you want it that plot precise. Out. You have to. When you shoot at a mile, you know, when you're shooting like well out over 1,000 yards, those factors.
So let me think. A mile. I have to ask, how much curvature of the Earth do you get after a mile? It's an interesting
you also get drop.
Question.
You get drop in curvature.
That'd be gravity drop.
Yes.
And then curve. Yeah. So both of those.
Yeah. Well, there's a good. Well, here's the thing to say, someone. If you have a bullet in your hand and you shoot a gun, which bullet drops faster?
Right.
They
generally they get the wrong answer to that.
Yeah, they drop at the exact same rate.
They'll hit the ground at the same time.
Exact same time, and that blows people's minds. They can't believe that's.
But we
fact.
do that in Physics 101. You know, it's a physics demo. So that's why physics is so important. You know, people say, "Oh, let's take biology and this." Great, but don't leave out the physics, because that's where the fundamental operations of nature are to be found, of the physical universe are to be found. So what you have is you have a gun at one side. It's like a thing that shoots out a projectile. I don't want to call it a gun. At one side of the stage, and then you have like a little stuffed animal at the other side of the stage, held up with an electromagnet at the top of its head. And these two are exactly the same level. As the projectile comes out from this mini cannon, it trips an electric circuit that releases the electromagnet at the top of the stuffed animal. The stuffed animal begins to fall. The bullet moves horizontally, but also falls. because gravity is pulling them both. And you watch the projectile curve down, you watch the stuffed animal curve down, and it hits the stuffed animal every single time.
The only factor that would change that would be if you put wings on the bullet and it was dealing with the wind.
Wings.
Right?
Yeah, wind would affect it.
Yeah.
Do they have bullets with wings? I haven't seen that.
No, they don't.
Okay.
No, but if they did,
Yeah.
you know, if like you shot the bullet and then they figured out like clink, and wings came out. Then
I
it
saw
would
that
ride
on
the
some
wind.
James Bond movie, I
Probably.
thought.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's just got to be frustrating for you when these things come back around. Like there was no flat Earth theory when I was in high school. So
Well, there
how
were
the
other
hell...
things, though. Think about it. When you were in high school, there was much more astrology going on.
Oh yeah.
The President Reagan.
Oh, let's talk about that.
Nancy Reagan
Is
had
that
an
all nonsense?
astrologer. So today, you don't see much of it.
Unless you talk to Steve Maxwell.
Well, but it's still there. It's just not. It's not manifesting in public policy.
Some people believe in it deeply.
I agree, but it's not up there in public policy. That's what I'm saying.
Okay. Well, Nancy Reagan was really the only one that made it public policy.
Sure,
wasn't
but
she?
but at the bar, do you hear people saying, "What's your sign?"
Oh,
Is
hell
that still
yeah.
a pickup time?
Oh, hell
Still?
yeah. 100%.
No, let it not
Especially,
be true.
Listen, dude, you're married.
On Tinder, they're
and
I know
you're
I've
an
been married,
older
so
man.
I'm out of it.
You don't
Excuse me.
understand. If you want to get laid, you got to talk nonsense to people.
Gotta talk.
Well,
smack.
I'm a Scorpio. And if you're a Taurus, we should just stop talking
Okay, so I missed that. I misled myself. I thought it
Yeah.
was fading.
Oh,
but
get the
but Nancy Reagan was the big proponent
Well,
at
yeah,
the time.
but it's nonsense astrology now. It's not like someone who really understands astrological charts and can plot it, and the moon's in retrograde, and you were born on, Celsius is rising, and all that crazy crap that they tried. I don't know what they're doing.
I was on a talk show with an astrologer.
A real one?
Apparently, yeah. She's a real one or a fake one, right?
How do you know?
She says she's real.
Okay.
And I trust her because she talks about how fake other astrologers are.
Oh,
so
she's a hater.
No.
She's a hater. Don't trust her.
And she was saying that the Kennedys all died during a lunar eclipse.
Oh, scary.
And that this is a very checkable statement. She just says this and everyone's listening and believing and said, wow, that can't be by accident. Well, I don't know when other Kennedys died, but I know when Jack Kennedy died, and it was November 22nd, 1963. So I don't need to know if there's an eclipse then. I just need to know what phase the moon is in.
Right.
Because you can only have a lunar eclipse when the moon is full. So the moon was nowhere near full. It was like 2 weeks away from full. Even if there was an eclipse, it didn't happen during an eclipse, is my point.
Right.
Okay? So...
Of course, because it was daylight.
Well, no, you can have a lunar eclipse at any time. Okay?
Yeah, you can have solar
You can have a solar eclipse at any time, too. It's just not for you.
Dark.
It's just not for you.
Right.
It'd be for the other
Somewhere
side of
else
the
in
earth.
the world.
Right. Don't be so centric. In fact, when there's a lunar eclipse, anyone on the side of the Earth that sees the moon will see the lunar eclipse. So, by the way, lunar eclipses, you get several per year, by the way, partial eclipses as a minimum. And every couple of years, there's full lunar eclipses. So these are not rare things to start. They're not rare, okay? So I said, he was shot when I forgot what moon it was, a first quarter moon. And she said, oh, well, this counts if they're anywhere within 2 weeks on either side of the eclipse.
What? That's a month.
That's a month out of 12. What? I said, let me just shut up here and let her keep. It was
What did she
say? We were
say?
sharing the time. It was Pharrell had a talk show. We were both on Pharrell's talk show. So, and he likes science, by the way. And he wore a NASA shirt at the Academy Award group photo.
That's
so
cool.
I got to give him some props for that. So I just said I have nothing more to say here.
Joe Rogan and Neil deGrasse Tyson completely shut down the flat Earth theory by explaining how basic science proves the planet is round. One of the biggest points they tackled was the way ships disappear over the horizon. If the Earth were flat, a ship sailing away would just look smaller and smaller until it vanished. But instead, we see ships sinking from the bottom up as they move further away. That only makes sense if the Earth is curved. Tyson even mentioned that ancient Greeks figured this out over 2,000 years ago by measuring shadows in different cities. If the Earth were flat, shadows would be the same everywhere at the same time. But they weren't, proving the curve. And let's keep talking about Earth and bring the theory of aliens visiting it. In this clip, Joe Rogan and Brian Greene, a very famous physicist, debunk the theory that aliens visited Earth.
When you think of human evolution, do you ever stop to think, what are we going to be like a million years from now if we do survive? Have you ever done this sort of thought experiment where you say, okay, if things keep going the same way, we used to be very strong and very hairy, and we're getting progressively softer as we don't need to use our bodies as much. Our brains are getting larger, our heads are getting bigger. Do you do that sort of thought experiment to see what we're going to become? And
not in a systematic scientific way, because the process is so fraught with incredible detail that I think it's hard for anybody, even experts in evolutionary biology, to really tell us anything that will hold water, that's really predictive. But on a general level, I mean, because people often wonder, why is it that we haven't been visited by aliens, right? This is a thing that comes up whenever you're talking about other life inside the universe.
I was going to get to that in a minute with you.
But the answer to that could be quite straightforward. Nobody out there cares about us because we're so ill-developed. We're so young on the cosmic scene that there's nothing interesting for them to find here on planet Earth. So to me, there's a natural explanation for why there can be other life out there, and yet they don't hang out around planet Earth, just the way we don't hang around an anthill to try to have a conversation with, what's going on inside that particular structure.
I buy that argument the least.
You do? Really?
Yeah,
okay.
Because we're interested in butterflies. Butterflies are so boring. We're interested in moles. We're interested in squirrels.
We're interested in them for very specific reasons, right? So typically we're interested either because we want to see the evolutionary development that yields this particular life form, or because there's a general curiosity about how this object is put together. If these other beings are so far beyond us that those kinds of taxonomy questions are no longer of any interest, then hanging around here may not hold anything for them to make the journey and stick around long enough for us to notice.
I don't buy that, again, for two reasons. One, because why would we assume that they're so far beyond us that they wouldn't be interested in these talking monkeys with thermonuclear weapons who dominate an entire planet?
Yeah.
That would be fascinating. If we found some planet somewhere where people are, the politicians all lie to themselves, everyone gets video through the sky, they fly in metal tubes that hurl over the oceans, they pollute the oceans and eat all the fish. Like, these people are fucking crazy.
Yeah.
We've got to go there and check this out.
But imagine that this civilization, the notion of lording over a planet is like us talking about, the ant lording over a grain of sand. So they may be galactic as opposed to planetary in their hegemony. And the notion of some little tiny rock orbiting some nondescript star in the suburbs of this completely ordinary galaxy off there on the side may not have the kind of pull that you imagine that it does.
Most UFO sightings turned out to be misidentified aircraft, weather balloons, or atmospheric distortions. The infamous Tic Tac UFO footage was likely an optical illusion caused by camera movement and sensor limitations rather than an alien craft. Declassified government documents that fueled alien conspiracies were either taken out of context or completely misunderstood. Instead of proving extraterrestrial visitors, the evidence points to human error, technological limitations, and sensationalism's creating the illusion of alien encounters.
Oh, I disagree. We think it's interesting when we see a chimp use a rock to open up a nut. We think it's interesting that, there's an amazing photograph of an orangutan that's spearfishing. Have you ever seen it?
I have seen that, actually.
It's really cool.
Right. No, it is.
He learned it from people, apparently, but it's still interesting nonetheless.
Right, but I don't think 100 years from now we're going to be as interested in these kind of qualities, or 1,000 years from now, or 10,000 years from now.
Well, why would we assume that these things that come here from another planet are more than 10,000 years
Well,
advanced?
that's a very good question. And I think the answer to that is we look at the history of the cosmos until today, and let's just call it our universe to be concrete, 13.8 billion years. And we look at life on planet Earth, and it's, a handful of billions of years old. So in a handful of billions of years, you can go from some complex molecules to human beings.
I like how you say it like it's not that long.
It's not that long because, imagine that life began a few billion years earlier in some other system. Stars and galaxies, they were starting up, a billion years after the Big Bang. So it could be that life in other worlds has a head start on us by a few billion years. And we know what can happen in a few billion years. It can take us from single cell to us.
Sure.
And you can imagine from a few billion years from now into the future, it could be radically different. So to say it's 10,000 years ahead of us, that to me would be the unexplained coincidence. How unlikely that they started and we started within 10,000 years in the span of billions of years. That seems unlikely to me.
Does it seem unlikely when you're talking about the infinite size of the universe, and there's perhaps an infinite number of Brian Greens out there talking to an infinite numbers of me?
Good point. So you're absolutely right. We're almost guaranteed, if the spatial expanse of the universe is infinitely large, that there are going to be places where it's within 10,000 years of us. But those are going to be a very small number compared to the places where it's not 10,000 years.
Is that true, or would it be an infinite number of them?
Well, it'd
not
be
a
infinite,
small number at all.
But they're different kinds of infinities.
So you mean in the space of the exact scope of the universe itself, a small number, relatively speaking, to where we are physically?
So I would say it slightly differently. I'd say look at a finite-sized ball in this large spatial expanse. So everything's finite now.
So let's get a 5 billion light year ball.
Right. Okay. And within that ball, the number that are differing from us by 10,000 years will be very, very small compared to the number differing from us by, say, a billion years or a couple of billion years.
So then,
simply by the law of numbers, if we imagine that they're random processes that are generated. Now, there could be some physical principle that prevents life from emerging before, say, 4 billion years ago. And if that's the case, and we're not aware of that principle, then you'd be absolutely right, that we'd all be roughly at the same starting point, and there's no reason to suspect that they would be so far ahead of us. But I don't know of any such principle.
But you almost have a reductionist view of this, right? Like, so if you had a guess, if you had $100 to bet, has alien life ever observed us? You would say no.
Well, by observed, you mean could they just turn a big telescope in our direction and gather some radio waves? But yes, I would take that bet, because frankly, we've only been generating radio waves for the last 70 years, so it's only a 70 light year ball around us, and within that small radius, very unlikely that there's been some alien world that's examining us.
So it would have to be something that would be able to recognize our signal and visit us.
Right.
But don't we look at observable planets and solar systems and discover Goldilocks planets?
We do.
And we examine those planets from vast distances away.
Yes.
And wouldn't you assume that a life form that is perhaps thousands of years more advanced than us, with the exponential increase in technology, I mean, if they ever got to the point where we are, that they would see these Goldilocks planets as well and recognize that Earth is one of them?
Yes. However, if they are so far away, they're going to be examining Earth as it was hundreds of thousands or millions or billions of years ago.
Right.
So if you truly want them to be examining us in the sense of human presence on planet Earth, then it's a much more difficult proposition to imagine that they've actually been doing that.
Is it possible there's another way to examine things where you're not hampered by the speed of light?
Not that I know of. I mean, any signal in the world that we're aware of is restricted by special theory by the speed of travel, which is now look, there's quantum entanglement, which is a strange property of the quantum world in which distant objects can behave as if they are one.
Yes.
And in some sense respond instantaneously to an influence in one location at a distant location, no matter how far apart they are. But that isn't really observing. That's more realizing correlations between physical properties at widely separated locations. But I'm not aware of a means of leveraging that to actually observe what's happening in some distant location, even if you do have quantum entangled particles.
But while aliens visiting Earth might seem a bit far from reality, chemtrails seem a bit more realistic. And for people who don't know what it is, it's simply the theory that those white streaks planes leave behind aren't just harmless water vapor, but chemicals secretly sprayed into the atmosphere. Some believe it's for population control, weather modification, or even mind control. This might seem really close to being true, but Joe Rogan brought up Mick West, a former video game programmer turned conspiracy theory debunker, and they're about to break down this theory, as you will see.
I asked people online, I said, Mick West from Metabunk is going to be here. What would you like me to debunk? And one of the first ones was chemtrails, because you cannot debunk it. It's real. Dun, dun, dun. I would say this to anybody who thinks that. That has got to be the most ineffective government program of all time. Like, you ask people what they're doing by spraying things in the sky, and the number one thing they'll say is like weather control. Weather control is one. Well, they don't have any fucking control of the weather, because if they did, they'd make it rain all over Santa Barbara and stop these fires.
Yeah.
I mean, there's hundreds of millions of dollars worth of damage going on right now. There's a fire that's bigger than the city of Washington, D.C.
They think they're making those fires. They think that that's part of the conspiracy. Anything that happens is always part of the conspiracy.
What do you think it is? Like, what is it with conspiracies? Like, why are they so attractive to people? There's something going on with people, right?
Yeah. I think, I've been looking into this a lot.
I bet you have. Especially since you're a government shell.
Well, I'm doing research for the book I'm writing, which is called Escaping the Rabbit Hole, and it's about how people get into the rabbit hole and how people get out of the rabbit hole. So the whole thing is about the rabbit hole, which is something basically people get sucked into. And I think people do a lot of research into the reasons behind people getting into conspiracy theories, like the psychological reasons and the personality reasons and things like that. But I think most conspiracy theorists are just regular people. They're just ordinary people who get sucked into something.
And why do you think that is?
Just from talking to them, they tell me like their origin stories, essentially. And they tell me what happened to them when they got into conspiracy theories. And it nearly always starts with them looking at some video. Nowadays it starts with them looking at some video, and then they just get sucked in. Yeah. And then they start looking at another video and another video and another video, and Facebook and YouTube is feeding them these videos, because once you start going down that road, you just can't change your trajectory.
Right. It's hard to treat. Yeah. I mean, YouTube, since they instigated this autoplay thing, or instituted this autoplay thing, where the next video plays immediately and they're all related.
Yeah.
I think that's definitely been a thing with people. And also like the suggestions on the right-hand side if you're watching one video on a particular subject.
Yeah, I was doing some experiments with that. I set up like a completely blank YouTube account, and I would just go in there and type in one thing, like contrails. And of course, when you look at contrails on YouTube, like half the videos you're going to get are going to be chemtrail videos.
Right.
And so if the first video you click on is a chemtrail video, then that just sets you down that road.
Well, I remember this was in the days, I think, before YouTube. This was in the days when maybe YouTube was around, but it just wasn't that popular. I remember me and my friend Eddie were high as fuck, and we're talking to my neighbor, and there was some plane that was flying over, and we were wondering why the clouds coming from behind this plane stood so long.
Wow.
And so I asked him. I used to have this neighbor, I used to call him Bling Bling, because Bling Bling was incapable of talking about anything other than objects. Like, all we talk about, that's a nice car. Is that a new car? Where'd you get that watch? Like, that was Bling Bling. All Bling Bling wanted to talk about is like material possessions. So he and I were parked in front of his. I was saying hi to him, and I said, "Hey man, do you remember clouds like sticking around in the sky that long?" And he's like, "No, I don't know. Is that a new truck?" And like, I just remember how ironic it was, because I had told Eddie about Bling Bling. You know, that like this is all this guy cares about and wants to talk about, and then he did that while we were out there. But I remember thinking, man, how weird would it be if all of a sudden clouds from jet engines started appearing, and it just appeared right before our eyes, and we hadn't noticed it. But I wasn't sold. It didn't make any sense to me, because my thought on it was the amount of people that had to be involved. You're talking about all these different airplanes, get all these people to keep their mouth shut. These are they're pilots, right? So they're not making shit tons of money, and they live here too. That's the other thing. Like, if they're actually spraying something in the sky, they live here too. Like, what are they spraying themselves?
Well, the theory now is that it's basically the power elite in the country is doing these chemtrails as a kind of last-ditch attempt to maintain power before the entire world collapses into chaos. So they think it's kind of like a desperate situation.
A power grab.
Well, not exactly. It's they're hanging on to have their kind of last hurrah. Like, really, they feel like the end of the world is nigh. Like, you know, there's about to be this environmental disaster, and the chemtrails are the only thing that is holding everything together. That's the thing that you get if you go to, like, you know, Geoengineering Watch, that Dane Whittington guy. He's basically an apocalyptic prophet now. He's basically preaching about how everything is going to end soon, and the chemtrails are the only thing that's stopping it, but they're also making it worse. So he's kind of saying, like, the chemtrails are helping, but we've got to stop them, otherwise they'll make it even worse. But we're pretty much all going to die either way.
There's a lot of money and we're going to die. There's a lot of people that love that trope. It's just like something that gets carted out constantly throughout history, because it's true. You are going to die. It's like, when are you going to die? You don't know. So because you don't know, you're freaking out. Like, is it going to be a car accident? Is it going to be a fire? Is it going to be an earthquake? Is it going to be a slow aging death? Or is it going to be the chemtrails? Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, I think that type of thing, like fear of dying, is one of those fundamental things.
Right.
That, every human is hardwired with certain things that that happens in their brain without them thinking about, and fear of dying and fear of other things, fear of fear of wolves or whatever. Something that's hardwired, and that's the type of thing that leads to different types of thinking that you end up being a conspiracy theorist, in part because your brain is wired that way.
You had a great quote about chemtrails when we did that television show together. You said chemtrails are like the training wheels for conspiracy theorists.
Yeah.
Because they're right above your head, and you just you see them right there. For people who don't understand why jets produce clouds, please explain that, because it's very simple.
It is very simple. Jet engines have water in their exhaust. If you look at a car on a cold day and you see the exhaust coming out of the tailpipe, you'll see like a cloud of condensation sometimes, and you'll see some water coming out. And when the exact same thing happens with jet engines. And when that exhaust hits the cold air, it condenses, it freezes, it makes a cloud. And contrails are essentially clouds. They're exactly the same physically as a regular cirrus cloud.
And it's dependent upon the amount of moisture in the atmosphere, and you can actually monitor it online. NASA actually has a website that will show you, and I believe it's set up for pilots, right? Is that what the air traffic people?
NASA actually has a contrail forecasting site, which isn't really for pilots or anything. It's just part of their contrail research. But they have a site where it'll predict where the contrails are going to be. But you can do it yourself. You just got to look up the relative humidity at a certain altitude. There's lots of different sites you can go to. I've got a whole bunch of them listed on Metabunk. And
just like the clouds vary in the sky, the amount of moisture varies in the sky as well, which is one of the reasons why you will see a jet pass through one area and you'll see a contrail, and then it almost looks like they shut the contrail jets off, and then you see it pick up maybe a couple hundred yards later.
Yeah, and that's, when you say like a cloud, it's really exactly the same as a cloud. If you look at any picture of a cloudy day and then just remove all the clouds, but they're still there as invisible clouds, then when the plane comes along, it's almost like the plane is this magic pen revealing these invisible clouds. Because all a cloud is a region of the sky where the humidity is above a certain level. So you know that the humidity is pretty patchy across the sky, because there's a cloud here and right next to it there's no cloud. So where the cloud is, it's high humidity. Where the cloud isn't, it's low humidity. But if both of those were just lowered 10%, then you get no clouds at all. Then a plane comes along, it raises the humidity in the cloud area and in the non-cloud area. But this area, because it was a bit higher, you get a trail forming, and this area you get no trail forming. So it's exactly the same as invisible clouds.
Yeah, and for people that are watching it and you're looking up, you think they're spraying something if you're conspiracy-minded. And because of a lot of the videos that are out there, in particular two that were recommended to me are, what in the hell are they spraying?
Chemtrails are often pushed by conspiracy theorists who get deeper into these beliefs through online videos. Once someone watches a video on chemtrails, algorithms on platforms like YouTube suggest more related content, trapping them in a loop that reinforces their ideas. Fear of the unknown and a desire to make sense of things like unusual cloud formations also play a role. Chemtrails are often seen as a gateway theory because they're visible and easy to grasp. People assume they're a deliberate government action, but they're just regular condensation trails from jets, which form when water vapor condenses in the cold air.
Right, so I got to meet with that guy that made those documentaries, and right away I knew something was wrong. Like, he's either on Adderall or something. He's just real edgy and speeded up, and just an odd guy, which is like a lot of people that are conspiratorially minded. They seem to be they're nervous and agitated, and when we went over why he thinks, one of the things that he was talking about was the soil samples and water samples, and that they've detected all this aluminum and barium in water, and particularly aluminum. And he's like showing me all these results that he had. But even on the very results that he showed me, it said sludge. Like he had sent them out for testing. And I said, well, what did you send? And he goes, well, I sent some water from these, ponds. And I said, but it says sludge on your testing. And he said, no, but it was water. I go, okay, but the lab said it's sludge. I go, what is sludge? He goes, well, I don't know what sludge is exactly. I go, well, let's look. Sludge is a combination of water and dirt. Okay, so you sent water and dirt. So do you know that aluminum is one of the most common metals on Earth? And you could basically scoop up a patch of dirt pretty much anywhere and find a bunch of aluminum in it. It's really, really common in trace amounts. I go, so what you did is you tested dirt and it tested positive for being dirt. I mean,
exactly.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah. And the guy was kind of freaking out. I'm like, how did you not put this together yourself? Like, if you're the guy who's making this video and you're trying to find a reason why you could, some facts that you could throw at people. We could say, hey, look, the government is definitely spraying things in the sky. They're spraying aluminum. Look, we found the aluminum, and we found it in the water. It's in your water supply. It's going to get in your body. It's going to poison you. Look, we found it in the water. How the fuck did he not look at it himself, is what I was thinking. And when me and him were having this conversation, I realized, like, you have these people that go down they're not open-minded in regards to these subjects. They go down a very narrow road, and that road is, the government is doing something to me. I need to find out what it is.
Yeah, and they're really motivated to actually find evidence.
Yes.
So that they're trying to find something, and actually trying to find an alternative explanation isn't really that attractive to them. So they find aluminum in the water or in the soil or whatever, and then they glom onto that as being, evidence of geoengineering, and that's great for them because they can just find loads and loads of samples of soil.
The idea of chemtrails is debunked by several key points. First, the aluminum particles found in water samples that conspiracy theorists point to as evidence of spraying are naturally occurring, often from the Earth itself. This dismisses the claim that these particles are the result of a secret government operation.
And that's something that gets repeated online. That very fact over and over again. The aluminum that they found in the water.
It's one of like the core tenets. It's like one of the pillars of the chemtrail thing. There's like 4 or 5 different things. Like in every conspiracy theory, there are these core beliefs.
Right.
That the 99% of the people who believe in the theory have.
One core belief is that you work for the government.
Yeah.
Dun, dun, dun.
That is a core belief.
Mick is a retired video game creator. You could find that out. Made video games.
That's right. Tony Hawk.
Yeah. Made a shit ton of money and decided to debunk dorks.
Yeah, I didn't start out, and I wouldn't refer to them as dorks. But
I'm saying they're dorks.
Yeah,
they're dorks if they don't believe. This is the problem. You're not a dork if you fall for something. You're a dork if you fall for something you don't believe the science that shows that it's impossible, that it's not real. That if you were spraying aluminum in the sky, folks, it would look like aluminum, you dummy. It wouldn't look like a cloud.
It wouldn't dissipate. It would look like a thin mist, essentially.
And metal is not. It's heavier than fucking air and vapor. It's not going to just sit up there like that. It would be a very different experience. It would slowly settle to the ground and wouldn't look like a cloud. And there's no reason to do it. There's no benefit whatsoever. There's no scientific evidence ever uncovered that there's any benefit for anybody of spraying aluminum over people. It's a waste of aluminum.
That's the thing. Even with the whole geoengineering field, there's really no solid evidence that it will work. We don't know what the side effects will be. We don't know how much we would need to spray, and we don't know, if when we stop doing it, will the world bounce back in a terrible way, and it'll be a big disaster.
Well, that's an interesting thing, because one of the reasons why contrails are interesting to study.
Additionally, the way aluminum would behave if it were intentionally sprayed doesn't match the characteristics of what's seen in the sky. Chemtrails would be more noticeable, yet they aren't. The trails in the sky that are often mistaken for chemtrails are simply contrails, condensation trails formed by water vapor from airplane exhaust. These form under certain atmospheric conditions and don't indicate any form of chemical spraying.
Is because they actually do have an effect on the temperature of the Earth, and this is something that we found out after 9/11. When September 11th happened in 2001, it was the big disaster. There was a shutdown on all flights in the United States. And when they did that, the temperature changed. Because these clouds literally do provide like a cover, and do they act as an insulator or an escalator?
They essentially act as an insulator. They block incoming radiation during the day, and they block outgoing radiation at night. But the net effect is that they actually block more outgoing radiation than they do incoming radiation. So if planes didn't fly at night, then you would cool the Earth down. You'd have to stop flying, quite a bit before nighttime. So if all the flights in the world were between 5 a.m. and 5 p.m. local time, then you could actually cool the world down by just not having any flights at night, because it's the night flights that have this really big kind of blanketing effect that stop the outgoing radiation.
So the night flights actually heat the world up?
Yes, they do. They act like a blanket. You know how it's warmer in a cloudy day, like it doesn't get as cold at night. Deserts get really cold at night because there's nothing over them. They don't have any cover. It's one of the reasons. But yeah, the contrails will actually warm the planet because the amount of outgoing radiation they block is just way higher, just because of the wavelengths and the size of the particles and whatnot.
So that's something to be concerned about, and that's something that people are legitimately monitoring. What people need to understand is just because you feel like when you look up in the sky and you see these crisscross patterns that they're spraying you. No one's spraying you. Yeah. This is just a natural reaction to jet engines and condensation in the atmosphere and the heat and the moisture of the jet engine. That's all it is.
They are actually talking about a way of using contrails for a kind of geoengineering. And this is something that people often get confused about, because you see these two words together, contrails and geoengineering, and they think, oh, that's chemtrails. But what they're trying to do is use air traffic control and computers and weather forecasting to make it so the planes don't fly through the contrail forming areas when they would make contrails at night, and make it so they do fly through contrail forming areas when it would make contrails during the day. So
this is a conversation they're having, or something that's actually being...
It's not something that they've actually done, right? But it's something that they can research fairly easily.
So if they were considering trying to heat up the atmosphere, or heat up the Earth at night, they would just fly over these moisture-rich areas, and if they weren't, they would avoid them.
Yeah, but the goal obviously is to combat climate change, global warming,
right,
and cool the Earth down. So a relatively cheap way of doing that, to a degree, is to have these planes be controlled by computers, and it kind of increases fuel costs for the airline by about 2 or 3%, because they have to make very deviations, sometimes in height and sometimes in direction. But it could actually have a significant effect on the Earth's climate if we had the entire world's airline fleets all in this program, where they would fly making contrails where they were needed and not making contrails where they were not needed.
And how exactly are they monitoring the moisture content of the atmosphere? Like, what are they using to do that? Satellites?
Yeah, it's a combination of things. They use sounding balloons, which are these weather balloons, basically, which got mistaken for UFOs quite a lot. And they use satellites, and they use planes sensing the environment when they're flying through it. And they use all these inputs, and it goes into a big computer model, which basically predicts what the humidity will be at any particular point. It's basically a big weather forecast for the upper atmosphere.
Scientific studies also show that geoengineering particles, which some conspiracy theories link to chemtrails, have no solid foundation in reality. Researchers in this field are focused on ways to potentially address climate change, but spraying large amounts of chemicals like aluminum would be extremely risky and impractical, with no current plans to carry it out. So which of these theories do you think is more believable and likely to be true? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to check out my other videos. There's plenty more content just as interesting as this one. I'm Mickey V. Have a great day.